In the quiet town of Ashburn, Virginia, a young woman named Bethany Ann Decker had been making her way through life with determination and joy. Her mother, Kim, often reflected that Bethany had been smiling since the day she was born, describing her daughter as simply a joy to be around, always upbeat and positive. To her younger siblings, Bethany was the encouraging leader of their small pack, the one who guided and supported them through childhood challenges. After excelling throughout her school years, Bethany was accepted into George Mason University, where she pursued a degree in global and economic change. Her academic abilities were remarkable, with one roommate noting that Bethany could postpone writing an essay until the night before, complete it in just an hour, and still receive an exceptional grade. She was by all accounts a naturally intelligent young woman. It was during her freshman year that Bethany's path intersected with that of Emil Decker, a cadet in the Reserve Officers Training Corps who was preparing to join the Army National Guard. Those who knew Emil described him as a hopeless romantic, someone who would remember the smallest details Bethany mentioned and thoughtfully act upon them later. Bethany's family welcomed Emil warmly into their lives, feeling as though he had always been part of their circle. After dating for a couple of years, Emil proposed to Bethany. Shortly after their engagement, the couple discovered that Bethany was pregnant. Though perhaps sooner than they had planned, they embraced the news with excitement, eager to begin their life together as a family. They named their baby boy Kai and settled into their new roles as parents. The transition into parenthood, however, brought with it the expected challenges. Financial strain became a reality as Emil continued his training with the Army National Guard, while Bethany balanced her studies at George Mason with a part-time position at a restaurant. The knowledge that Emil would soon be deployed to Afghanistan added another layer of stress to their situation. With assistance from both their families, Bethany and Emil managed to maintain some stability. Yet Bethany increasingly felt they were living separate lives, drifting into different worlds. She expressed concerns to Emil that perhaps they had moved too quickly without adequate planning. Some accounts suggest that at this point, the couple decided to try a temporary separation. Though disappointed, Emil wanted to respect Bethany's needs and agreed to the arrangement. As Emil prepared for his deployment overseas, Bethany relocated to an apartment closer to her workplace, allowing her to take on additional shifts. It was at the restaurant where she worked that Bethany would meet Ronald Roldan, a 31-year-old originally from Bolivia. A relationship developed between them, with Bethany later telling friends that she had been feeling isolated and lonely with Emil away for extended periods. Despite reservations expressed by her friends, Ronald soon moved into Bethany's apartment. Her best friend Sarah was particularly surprised by this development and cautioned Bethany against it. However, Sarah also recognized that Bethany would ultimately make her own decisions and wanted to support her happiness. Though Bethany and Emil remained separated with diminishing communication between them, Emil sensed that something had changed in her life. From its beginning, Bethany's relationship with Ronald showed troubling signs. Those around her noticed his controlling, jealous, and sometimes violent behavior. Bethany's mother, Kim, shared her concerns, having heard disturbing accounts of what was occurring in the apartment. She even suspected that Ronald might have harmed Kai after noticing the child had a black eye on one occasion. The explanation given was that Kai had fallen backward from a chair while being watched by a friend. but Bethany's family harbored doubts about this account. They also discovered that Ronald had contacted Kai's daycare center pretending to be Emil. Fortunately, the staff recognized something was amiss and took precautions, establishing a code system for phone communications to prevent Ronald from gaining access to the child. Ronald's controlling behavior extended to constant texting and calling demanding proof of Bethany's whereabouts and companions. He would even follow her to verify her location, then wait outside until she left. Bethany found herself in an increasingly difficult situation and eventually confided in Emil about everything, acknowledging that she had made a mistake. Despite the circumstances, Emil expressed a desire to work on their relationship, emphasizing that his family remained his priority. He had sensed that something had been wrong for some time, noting that Bethany had been working nearly 6 days each week, barely communicating with him and seeming distant when she did. To address these issues, Bethany and Emil decided to take a holiday together during his leave, hoping to repair their fragile marriage. As 2010 came to a close, Emil sent a warm message to his family. "Hi, I'm Specialist Decker, and I'm stationed at Morales Frazier, and I just want to give a lovely shout out to my wife, who lives in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and to my son Kai. I love you, and I miss you very much. Have a Merry Christmas." In mid-January 2011, Emil received his leave, and the couple maintained their plans for a holiday in Hawaii. When Bethany met Emil at the airport, another complication became apparent. She was pregnant again, and Ronald was the father. Emil later said that he wasn't angry and still wanted their holiday to proceed. He reflected, "I'd been overseas, and it was a completely different world. Coming back to the United States, I was just happy to be home, to be alive, to be with my family, that anything else in the whole entire world really did not matter to me at all." The trip to Hawaii represented a crucial moment for their relationship, and by all accounts, they enjoyed their time together. They spent more time talking, laughing, and reconnecting than they had in months, creating hope that their relationship might find its way back to solid ground. When Emil and Bethany returned from Hawaii on January 28th, Bethany visited her grandmother. They spent a pleasant afternoon making pizza and discussing the trip, though her grandmother sensed there were aspects of Bethany's life that remained unshared. She could see that Bethany, young and overwhelmed by complex circumstances, was struggling with the weight of it all. Later, Bethany confided that she felt consumed by stress, guilt, and sadness, experiencing the lowest emotional point of her life. That evening, Emil joined them for dinner, where difficult conversations about their future continued. Unexpectedly, Bethany's phone began to ring. She quickly gathered her belongings and rushed out, saying they didn't understand what might happen to her if she didn't return home. Emil was scheduled to fly back to his deployment on February 2nd, and while their holiday had been restorative, uncertainty remained about how things would proceed after his departure. The plan was for Bethany to meet him at the airport for a farewell, assuring him, "I will always be there, no matter what." On February 2nd, Emil arrived at the airport, anticipating Bethany's presence, but she never appeared. He contacted her workplace and learned that she hadn't reported for any of her shifts in the previous days. Before boarding his flight, Emil reached out to Bethany's family members to alert them that something seemed amiss. Throughout the days that followed, friends and family attempted to contact Bethany without success. Kim, Bethany's mother, received several unusual phone calls that have not been publicly detailed. Bethany's friend Sarah noticed activity on Bethany's Facebook account and initiated a conversation through Messenger. Sarah immediately recognized that someone other than Bethany was responding. The English was incorrect, words were misspelled, and basic questions went unanswered. Sarah shared her suspicions with Kim. Emil also received an email from Bethany's account that he believed had not been written by his wife. By this point, Kim had heard from 4 different individuals who all suspected that Bethany's Facebook account had been compromised. Bethany's grandparents, who lived closer to her than Kim did, drove to her apartment complex to check on her. They found her car parked outside at an unusual angle with a flat tire. Notably, no one had observed the vehicle in that location prior to this discovery. After knocking on the door and receiving no response, they called emergency services on February 19th and reported Bethany missing. Family members explained to authorities that while Bethany occasionally went several days without communication, 3 weeks of silence was highly unusual. Given her absence and pregnancy, law enforcement moved quickly, concerned about the time that had already elapsed. A review of Bethany's financial records revealed that her phone credit cards and debit cards had not been used since January 29th. She had missed her university classes, hadn't sought medical care at any local hospitals, hadn't appeared at work, and her passport remained at home, indicating she hadn't left the country. When police examined her apartment, they found no signs of forced entry or struggle, and nothing appeared obviously disturbed. Her personal belongings remained in place, suggesting she hadn't packed for a departure. Similarly, her car contained no evidence of foul play or clues to her whereabouts. By early March, detectives organized a press conference. Search efforts expanded to include divers examining nearby waters, canine units searching fields, and FBI involvement. While tips came in, none led to meaningful progress in locating Bethany. Based on the timeline established, it appeared that Emil had been the second to last person to see Bethany. He received permission to return home and assist with the investigation, voluntarily taking a polygraph test and cooperating fully with extensive questioning. Emil maintained that he had no involvement in Bethany's disappearance and expressed deep concern despite their relationship difficulties. Emil understood why investigators needed to examine him closely, given his departure from the country around the time Bethany went missing and the news of her pregnancy with another man's child. He cooperated fully with all inquiries, no matter how difficult, to eliminate himself as a suspect and focus on helping find Bethany. His movements between January 28th and February 2nd were all accounted for. Law enforcement considered whether Bethany might have chosen to take a break from her life given her stressful circumstances. However, going so long without contacting her mother-grandmother or seeing her son Kai was entirely inconsistent with her character. Police continued to classify her disappearance as a missing persons case rather than presuming something more sinister had occurred. They refrained from identifying suspects, stating it would be premature and wanting to encourage public vigilance without suggesting specific theories. Investigators still needed to speak with Ronald Roldan, who was no longer living in Bethany's apartment and was located at his parents' home. Ronald stated that the relationship had ended and he had moved out recently. His account clarified that he, not Emil, had been the last person to see Bethany. While Emil had last seen her on January 28th, Ronald claimed to have seen her on the afternoon of January 29th, describing her as seeming normal. The restaurant manager partially corroborated this timeline, confirming that Bethany had called just after 2 p.m. on January 29th to confirm her shifts for the coming week, including one scheduled for that evening, though she never arrived to work it. Ronald explained that he hadn't reported Bethany's disappearance because after their relationship ended, they naturally had no further communication, so he wasn't aware she was missing. Financial records showed that Ronald had left Bethany's apartment on the afternoon she was last seen making a withdrawal from his bank account at 4:26 p.m. He had sent 2 messages to Bethany at 4:01 p.m. and 4:31 p.m. informing her that he would be staying with his children at their apartment. However, investigators confirmed that after Bethany contacted her workplace at 2:08 p.m., her phone showed no further activity, raising questions about whether she ever received these messages. Danielle, Ronald's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his 2 children, stated that she had dropped the children with him around 4:30 p.m. Ronald told her he wasn't certain if Bethany would return, as they had argued earlier and she had left. When Danielle came back a few days later, Ronald said he hadn't seen or heard from Bethany since that day. Investigators obtained a search warrant for Ronald's apartment, but found nothing significant. They also examined his computer phone and hard drives without discovering evidence linking him to Bethany's disappearance. A background check revealed that Ronald had previous interactions with law enforcement, but at this stage, there was nothing connecting him to Bethany's case. Given that he was the last known person to have seen her, he was classified as a person of interest, though not a suspect. Bethany's story gained national media attention, particularly after details emerged about her marriage to Emil and pregnancy with Ronald's child. In May 2011, when Bethany would have been due to give birth, detectives issued another press release and contacted hospitals to determine if she had sought medical care anywhere. Again, no information emerged. As months became years, the investigation showed little progress. In May 2012, a new detective was assigned to the case, offering fresh perspective. That year, what would have been Bethany's 23rd birthday coincided with Mother's Day, and family and friends gathered to raise awareness and share memories. Emil and Kai attended this event as well. Kim connected with the Harrington family, who had lost their daughter Morgan in 2009, finding common ground in their shared experiences of uncertainty and loss. In late 2012, Investigation Discovery aired an episode about Bethany's case on their program Disappeared, generating renewed attention but yielding no answers. As time passed, tips and leads diminished and other investigations necessarily took priority. Emil eventually filed for divorce from Bethany and received sole custody of their son Kai. Everything remained relatively quiet until November 2014, when an unrelated emergency call would cast new light on Bethany's case. On November 12, 2014, police in North Carolina responded to a serious domestic incident at approximately 2 a.m. A woman named Vicky reported having shot her boyfriend twice in self-defense after he attacked her. She stated that he had approached her from behind, grabbed her by the hair, and broken her neck in 2 places before punching and biting her. Despite her injuries, Vicky managed to retrieve her gun and shoot him twice. He then took the weapon from her and shot her 3 times, including once in the head. She still managed to crawl to a neighbor's house where the neighbor secured the doors, took his own gun for protection, and called emergency services. Vicky's boyfriend was Ronald Roldan. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder, though this charge was later reduced as part of a plea agreement, much to Vicky's frustration. He received a minimum 6-year sentence, after which he would be transferred to immigration and Customs Enforcement custody to begin deportation proceedings to Bolivia. Vicky informed authorities that Ronald had claimed he could make people disappear. A friend had contacted Vicky after seeing a television program about Bethany's case that identified. When Vicky confronted him about this, she said, deeply, she became aware that something was wrong. Now, Ronald knew that she had knowledge about Bethany. He reported that the violence in their relationship had inward. Vicky expressed her belief that in prison, he would either return to harm her or hurt someone else. His violent nature raised renewed concerns about his potential involvement in Bethany's disappearance. Vicky later shared her story on several television programs. She had lost an eye as a result of Ronald's attack, suffered a neck broken in 2 places, and faced significant financial difficulties due to her medical expenses. Nevertheless, she remained determined to share her experience and assist law enforcement in building their case. She personally reached out to Kim to share what she knew and offer support, forming a close friendship with Bethany's mother. Investigators discovered that before his relationship with Vicky, Ronald had dated a waitress named April, who had also filed charges against him. After he pushed her down a flight of stairs, spat on her, and threw her belongings outside. He had agreed to pay her $2,500, and the charges were eventually dismissed. Detectives working on Bethany's case traveled to Ronald's prison to interview him again, but he responded with verbal abuse, shouting and refusing to cooperate. His resistance only strengthened their determination to pursue the investigation. Through his attorney, Ronald maintained his innocence regarding Bethany's disappearance, stating that he hoped for her safe return and was praying for her. In March 2019, investigators announced positive developments in Bethany's case, though they did not provide specific details. They indicated that progress had been made after analyzing Bethany's Facebook account through a search warrant signed by Detective Michael Boone, who had played a significant role in solving the murders of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. Morgan Harrington's family had formed a supportive relationship with Kim over the years, offering understanding through shared experiences. For the next year, and into 2020, information about the case remained limited, as law enforcement carefully managed the investigation without public disclosure. Then in November 2020, nearly a decade after Bethany's disappearance, a significant announcement was made. Ronald Roldan would be charged with abduction in connection with Bethany's case upon his release from prison in North Carolina. The advancement in the case had been prompted by evidence showing that both Bethany's and Ronald's individual Facebook accounts had been accessed multiple times from the same IP address during the days surrounding her disappearance. Ronald was formally charged with abduction, and within a month, the charge was elevated to second-degree murder. Prosecutors described the circumstantial evidence as substantial and expressed confidence in their case. Ronald's legal team requested bail, which the judge denied. He entered a not guilty plea, and his trial was initially scheduled for August 2021, but was postponed to February 2022, then delayed once more to January 30, 2023, when the sheriff's office released an additional 60,000 files related to the case, requiring more time for the defense to review. However, the trial did not proceed as planned. In November 2022, Ronald Roldan, then 41 years old, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a plea agreement. When asked to describe what had occurred, Ronald claimed that he and Bethany had argued in the apartment, and he had pushed her, causing her to fall and strike her head on the windowsill, resulting in her immediate death. He stated that, afraid to contact emergency services, he had placed her body in a large bag and disposed of it in the trash compactor at the apartment complex. He continued to deny using her Facebook account and maintained that the death had been accidental and that he had panicked. Given his history of violence and the proven falsehood of his denial regarding the Facebook account, investigators and experts questioned his characterization of the events as unintentional. In February 2023, Ronald received a 12.5-year sentence. Though he was formally sentenced to the maximum 40 years, all but 12.5 years were suspended as part of his plea agreement. He could potentially serve additional time if he commits further offenses or violates the conditions of his release. Throughout the court proceedings, Kim and Vicky sat together witnessing Ronald's sentencing. Bethany's family expressed frustration that Ronald would spend only slightly longer in prison than they had spent searching for answers about Bethany, but they also acknowledged gratitude for the resolution, however imperfect. Many lives had been affected by this case, and the wait for answers had been long and difficult. To this day, Bethany's remains have never been recovered, and law enforcement believes they are unlikely to be found. Kim has focused on keeping Bethany's memory alive and encouraging people to express their feelings to those they care about, knowing that circumstances can change unexpectedly. She continues to work with Help Save the Next Girl, a nonprofit organization founded by Morgan Harrington's parents to educate communities about safety and violence prevention. Kim reflected, "The night before Bethany was murdered, she called me and said, 'Mom, I love you.' That was the last thing she said. So I just want to encourage each and every one of you to not take for granted tomorrow, and to really make sure that you are talking to your loved ones, that you're letting people know how much you care, and not wait for the tomorrow, which may never be." The case of Bethany Ann Decker reminds us of the importance of recognizing concerning behaviors in relationships and maintaining connections with those we hold dear. In the peaceful community of New Ash Green in Kent, England, resided 46-year-old Sarah Wellgreen, a devoted mother of 5, who worked diligently as a beautician. The close-knit post-war development fostered a strong sense of community where Sarah had built her life, surrounded by people who cared for her. Her mother, Anne, often spoke of how Sarah cared deeply for others, consistently defending those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Sarah maintained close relationships with her family members, regularly meeting them for lunch, shopping excursions, and holiday trips. To her 5 children, who were the center of her world, she was a dedicated mother who made special efforts for birthdays and celebrations. 2 of her sons, Jack and Lewis, were from a previous relationship, while the other 3 children she shared with Ben Lacomba, her former partner. Sarah and Ben's story began in December 2004, when they met through a dating website. Ben, who was born in Greenwich, had moved to Majorca with aspirations of becoming a pilot. After making a positive impression on Sarah's 2 sons, she decided to leave her job and relocate with her boys to Majorca to begin anew with Ben. Unfortunately, their happiness proved short-lived. Sarah's inability to speak Spanish prevented her from finding employment, and this combined with homesickness created difficulties for her. Ben's dreams of becoming a pilot also remained unfulfilled, leading him to work at the airport instead. Eventually, they decided to return to the United Kingdom. After welcoming their first child together, they settled into a 4-bedroom home at 22 Bays Shore in New Ash Green. Ben began working as a taxi driver, while Sarah continued her career as a beauty therapist. However, the relationship started showing signs of strain as they argued frequently. When Sarah ultimately decided to end the relationship, Ben responded by forcing her and her 2 sons to leave the home while keeping their 3 shared children with him. The following morning, Ben arranged a court hearing where he claimed Sarah had abandoned her children, resulting in him being awarded custody. Sarah, unaware of what was transpiring, was unable to defend herself and was devastated by the outcome. Sarah and her 2 eldest children moved in with her mother and stepfather. The family carefully saved money to consult a solicitor for legal advice. Their efforts proved successful when in August 2016, Sarah was granted full custody of the children. Around this time, Sarah's personal life took a positive turn when she met Neil James through a dating application. Their relationship flourished and eventually led to an engagement. However, Sarah worried that if she moved in with Neil, Ben would contest custody of their children. In 2018, Sarah proposed that she and Ben live together in the house and co-parent their children, despite their romantic relationship having ended, an arrangement her family had advised against. Recognizing this wasn't ideal. Due to the lingering emotional tension, Sarah decided to purchase Ben's share of the house. On October 9, 2018, Sarah took her children to school in the morning before heading to work to meet with clients. She was notably excited about securing a new higher-paying position. Around 8 in the evening, Sarah was seen arriving home. She sent several text messages, including one to Neil, and another to a friend that read, "There's always something to look forward to. You've just got to open your eyes and dream." Her final text message was sent at 10 o'clock before she retired for the night. The following day held special significance as it was one of her children's birthdays, an occasion for which Sarah had made preparations as usual. When morning arrived, Neil sent her a text message, but Sarah didn't respond. As hours passed without any response from her, Neil reached out to Ben to inquire if he had seen her. Ben replied that he thought Sarah was with Neil, as he hadn't seen her either. Neil contacted Sarah's family to explain that he had been trying to reach Sarah since morning without success. Sarah occasionally forgot to charge her phone or inadvertently left it in her car, so her mother also attempted to call her, but like Neil, couldn't make contact. One of Sarah's sons used text messages social media and called her work phone, trying to elicit a response, but there was still no word from Sarah. By the following day, she still hadn't returned home. Her mother persisted in trying to reach her, but as Sarah continued to remain unresponsive, her mother knew something was seriously wrong. Everyone grew increasingly concerned for her welfare, and they agreed that if she hadn't made contact or returned home by the next day, they would notify the police. 48 hours had passed since anyone had seen Sarah Wellgreen, and she still hadn't communicated with anyone. Ben contacted the police, saying, "I want to report a missing person. She lives with me. She's my children's mom. We're not together. We just live together. She came home Tuesday night, and then we all went to bed. And then when me and the kids woke up in the morning, she wasn't there." DCI Ivan Beasley, senior investigating officer with Kent Police, was assigned to investigate Sarah's disappearance. Ben informed the officers that after Sarah had arrived home on the 9th, he had put the children to bed, and retired to his room in the loft conversion while she went to her room on the first floor. He explained that when he awoke the next morning, Sarah wasn't home, though her car remained parked in its usual spot. Given that it was one of their children's birthdays, he said he had expected her to return. A missing persons investigation promptly commenced, and when Sarah's bedroom was searched, something immediately stood out to investigators. All of her personal belongings were still there, including her money bank cards, keys, and handbag. For DCI Ivan Beasley, this was extremely concerning, as these weren't items Sarah would typically leave behind. Since her car keys were still at the house, one theory considered was that perhaps she had gone for a run or walk and suffered an injury, leaving her unable to seek help. A 5-mile search radius was established around Sarah's home, encompassing fields and woodlands in an effort to locate her. Hospitals were also checked to determine if she had been admitted to any of them. Despite this extensive search, there was still no sign of Sarah, and phone records didn't indicate she had arranged to meet anyone that evening. DCI Ivan Beasley noted Ben Lacomba's demeanor during this time, observing that Ben didn't appear particularly concerned. The way he was presenting to us was described to me by my officers as quite odd. He didn't really want to engage with us. He didn't really want us at the house, which for somebody who had reported Sarah missing, he didn't seem to be acting in that way, the detective recalled. Officers also discovered that Sarah's family had needed to pressure Ben into contacting the police initially. Sarah's son utilized social media to spread the word, and the close-knit community immediately rallied together to search for her. Hundreds of local residents came forward to assist. One of the volunteers, Sharon Brine, remarked on Ben Lacomba's behavior. "We were very baffled with Ben when during day 3 or 4 of our searching, he went into the village office to book the village hall, and we thought it was completely bizarre. There's half the village looking for the mother of his children, and he's trying to arrange a kids' game in the village." When Sarah's 2 oldest children attempted to visit their siblings, they were told they weren't permitted to do so. Lacomba had taken the 3 youngest children to his aunt's house and had also initiated court proceedings to gain custody of them. DCI Beasley noted, within a few days of her disappearance, Ben had gone to the family court and was trying to have an urgent meeting so he could have primary custody of the children. To generate leads, the police issued a public appeal for information about Sarah. As days continued to pass, without any sign of her concerns, escalated that she might have met with foul play. Detective Superintendent Paul Fotheringham stated, "We have experts with specialist technology and forensic scientists working with us to try and find Sarah." Police spoke with Ben again to better understand the dynamics of the family home. He told them that Sarah would often disappear without informing anyone to meet other people. The police also visited Neil's residence to search the property and ask additional questions, as he was among the last individuals to have contact with her. Neil explained that he had called Sarah at 9:24 p.m. on the night she was last seen. They conversed for approximately 15 minutes and then exchanged a few text messages before saying goodnight. Phone records confirmed this account, and since Neil was at home with his daughter at the time, he suggested the police check the M25 cameras to verify he hadn't driven to Sarah's location. His story checked out, and Neil was cleared of suspicion. A week had now passed since Sarah Wellgreen had seemingly vanished. Police decided to examine local camera footage, which involved searching through more than 15,000 hours of recordings. Around 2 a.m. on October 10th, coinciding with the time Sarah went missing, CCTV cameras captured a car driving in the area. One of the images showed a vehicle with a logo on the driver's side door, similar to the red taxi driven by Ben Lacombe, which also had a logo on the driver's door. To ensure accuracy, police brought in an expert to compare his vehicle with the grainy image from the footage. The expert determined that the footage indeed showed Ben's vehicle, and approximately 2 hours after it was first recorded on CCTV, the same vehicle was seen returning. This appeared to contradict Ben's statement that he had been at home in bed when Sarah disappeared. The home had an extensive CCTV system operated from Ben's bedroom, allowing him to monitor activities throughout the house. DCI Beasley described it as quite an elaborate setup. He had cameras at the side, at the front, and at the back of his house, all controlled by a system kept in his bedroom, which was in the converted attic part of the house. When they reviewed footage from the day Sarah vanished, they observed Ben returning home with no one else entering the property before Sarah's arrival. The neighboring house also had security cameras, which contained 3 months' worth of footage to review. They could see that the CCTV camera from Ben and Sarah's home had been operating almost constantly in the period leading up to Sarah's disappearance. The footage from the neighbor's house showed the infrared lights from Ben's cameras and also revealed that after midnight on the day she was last seen, Ben's cameras had been switched off. Ben claimed that the files from his home cameras weren't usable because they had been corrupted and that the complex system actually hadn't been functioning properly for the past year. Another significant piece of footage showed Ben returning home with his vehicle in a clean condition after taking the children to school. The following day, the car was again captured on CCTV, this time with mud and dirt on the sides and wheels. Around 10:30, he went to the office where his taxi company operated, and when the car arrived, there the dirt was gone. Another detail that stood out to investigators was that after reviewing the neighbor's camera footage, they learned Ben always parked his car in the same spot until the night Sarah disappeared. That night, he parked at the back of the property in an area not covered by the neighbor's CCTV. As detectives searched woodland near Sarah's home, police announced that her disappearance had evolved into a potential murder investigation. She just had a new job offer that she was looking forward to. She talked to friends about looking forward to the future. Officers noted. Following extensive investigations and inquiries and also searching, we're now treating this as a potential homicide investigation. The task confronting the officers was immense. They didn't know where Ben had driven that night or what had occurred during that 2-hour window, and Sarah still hadn't been found. Police believed that he had murdered Sarah and then transported her body to another location. On December 20th, authorities made the decision to arrest Ben Lacombe on suspicion of murdering Sarah Wellgreen. He was taken to the police station for questioning. "You are under arrest today on suspicion of the murder of your ex-partner. We believe she may be dead, and that may be at your hand. So did you kill her?" Over the next 7 hours, Lacombe was interviewed by investigators. He remained silent, refusing to answer any questions posed to him. During a search of the house, a shovel that appeared to be brand new was discovered in the garden shed. Investigators needed to locate Sarah, determine the cause of death, and prove that Ben Lacombe had deliberately committed this act. Specialists from fire service and marine units across the country joined the extensive search efforts to find Sarah, including areas of the Thames and land near the Blue Water Shopping Center. Roads were closed while searches were conducted, and 1,400 sites were examined, but none led to the discovery of Sarah's body. Nevertheless, based on the case that had been built on December 28, 2018, Ben Lacombe was charged with the murder of Sarah Wellgreen. The trial of Ben Lacombe began at Woolwich Crown Court. Prosecutor Alex Morgan QC noted in a documentary about the case, having a trial with nobody present creates unique challenges. One pivotal moment for the prosecution involved revealing a conversation Ben had with police several days before his arrest. They had requested his phone, and he signed the consent form, but then refused to give permission for deleted data to be retrieved. He told them he would provide it the following day at the station because it was late, and he wanted to go to bed, but CCTV showed that Ben hadn't gone to bed. His car was spotted parked by the River Thames later that night, seemingly disposing of something that police believed was his mobile phone. After Sarah's disappearance, Lacombe was captured on CCTV in a shop purchasing a new phone of the exact same model into which he inserted his old SIM card. DCI Beasley observed, "Usually, we get a lot of cooperation from people, especially when there are concerns for a loved one. But actually, Ben was more interested in the information we could retrieve from his phone and refused to give us his phone." Another aspect of the case that prosecutors argued demonstrated planning was the hours between his departure from the address and his return, suggesting he had already selected a location to conceal Sarah's body. Regarding the shovel found during the search, the defense contended it was there for his mother to tend to the flowers in front of the house. However, the flowers at the home didn't require such a large shovel, supporting the theory that it might have been used to dig a grave. Allison Morgan, QC, from the prosecution, described the idea that he had purchased what she termed a gravedigger shovel as a gift for his mother as complete nonsense. Throughout the trial, additional information emerged that provided a clearer picture of Ben and Sarah's relationship. When she arrived home from work on October 9th, she informed Ben of her plan to buy his share of the house as her new job would put her in a financial position to do so. This meant that Ben Lacombe was losing control in multiple ways, and if Sarah were to leave him permanently and sell the house, he would have been left with virtually nothing. The judge-jury counsel, court clerk, and ushers were escorted by police to the family home to help them contextualize the evidence and understand the layout of the residence, including the intricate CCTV system. Defense barrister Rebecca Trowler, QC, concluded their case by saying, "What I ask of you is a lot less than what the prosecution asks. They are asking you to convict a 39-year-old man with no criminal convictions, not even cautions of the carefully planned murder of the mother of his children. That is a big ask." After 30 days of trial, the jury retired to deliberate. On October 28, 2019, Ben Lacombe was found guilty of the murder of Sarah Wellgreen. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 27 years. Ben Lacombe showed no remorse or emotion, as he was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of his ex-partner, Sarah Wellgreen. He will serve a minimum of 27 years for killing the mother of 5 at the home they shared in New Ash Green, and won't be eligible for release until he is at least 66 years old. After the trial, her eldest son Louis, speaking on behalf of the family, expressed hope that Lacombe would never be released unless he revealed the location of Sarah's body. "As far as the law is concerned, justice has been served for Sarah. We hope he will never be released unless he admits his guilt and reveals the location of her grave." To date, he has shown no remorse or care for either Sarah or his own children. Because Ben Lacombe has refused to reveal the location of Sarah's body, we, her family, have been unable to mourn Sarah's passing or lay her to rest in peace. Since Lacombe has refused to disclose what happened to Sarah or where she is, his continued unwillingness to provide this information could result in a longer imprisonment under Helen's law. Named after murder victim Helen McCourt, Helen's law makes killers ineligible for parole if they do not tell police where they've hidden a victim's body. This legislation followed the tireless campaigning of Marie McCourt, mother of Helen, a 22-year-old insurance clerk who was murdered in 1988. Her murderer, Ian Sims, never revealed the location of her body. The petition calling for Helen's law garnered more than 600,000 signatures and high-level government support. In November 2020, Helen's law received royal assent. Under this law, killers could still be released if no longer deemed a risk to the public, even if they refuse to disclose information. But the parole board will be legally required to consider whether they have cooperated with inquiries as part of their assessment. One of Sarah's elder sons reflected, "There's still that missing piece, and it will always be like that because there'll always be that missing piece because of what he has done. I believe he's withholding that because that's the only sort of power he has left." Sarah's ex-husband also shared his thoughts on wanting her body to be found. Sarah was very bubbly, outgoing, and she obviously knew what she wanted in life, and she would do anything to achieve that. And I think she would have achieved it if she was still here. When I heard that she had gone missing at first, I thought maybe she'd turn up, but she didn't. And it's very sad. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. If they can find a body, it would give closure to the family and myself because I was still friends with Sarah. In the year following her disappearance, nearly 3,000 potential locations were identified, but none led to Sarah. The community in New Ash Green has never abandoned their search for Sarah Wellgreen. They have stated they will never cease looking for her. And a Facebook page called Search for Sarah Wellgreen was established to aid in these efforts. For those who knew and loved Sarah, the pain of not knowing where she is and what happened to her remains profound. Sarah's family hopes that one day Lacombe will reveal her whereabouts so that she can finally be brought home and laid to rest. In the quiet community of Fairfield, Indiana, a creative young woman with dreams of Colorado and a future in art found herself at the center of a mystery that would take years to unravel. This is the story of Caitlin Markham, told in the gentle cadence of facts and memories as the investigation slowly revealed what happened on a summer night in 2011. Caitlin Markham lived in Fairfield, Indiana, a community of just over 40,000 residents where violent crime was notably rare. At 21 years old, she was described by those who knew her as somewhat eccentric, creative, thoughtful, and an overall sweet person. Her artistic talents had been apparent since childhood, and you could often find her with a paintbrush tucked into her hair, always looking for something new to create. In August of 2011, Caitlin was studying graphic art at the Art Institute of Ohio in Cincinnati. When not attending classes, she worked part-time at a local bridal shop. She and her fiancé, John Carter, had been together for approximately 6 years and engaged for 1. John was artistic as well, teaching glass blowing, and together they had been making plans to move to Colorado in the near future. That August represented a time of transition in Caitlin's life. She was days away from turning 22 weeks from graduating and months away from relocating and getting married. Many significant life changes awaited her on the horizon. She maintained a close relationship with her father, Dave, and her younger sister, Allie, who was 15 at the time. Her father would later describe her as positive, outgoing, and motivated. She had a plan, he said, and she was sticking to it. According to him, she was too pragmatic to ever just disappear without explanation. On August 14, 2011, something unexpected occurred. Caitlin stopped responding to messages, and her phone went directly to voicemail when called. Her fiancé, John, went to her home and found her car parked outside, which was unusual since she would normally have been at the bridal shop at that time. When John entered her townhouse, there was no sign of forced entry. Nothing appeared out of place or broken, but Caitlin was nowhere to be found. Her cell phone seemed to be missing as well, and her dog was roaming around unattended, which was concerning. At 8:00 p.m. that evening, John called 911. "Hi, my name is John Carter," he said to the dispatcher. "I am calling. I know that you're not supposed to report a missing person before 24 hours, but my fiancée is missing. I can't find her anywhere." He explained that he had last seen Caitlin around midnight the previous night as he was leaving her townhouse. John lived with his mother, just a 5-minute walk away. He mentioned that they had exchanged a few text messages after he left, but a few hours later, Caitlin had stopped responding and hadn't replied to his good morning text either. When police met with John, they noticed scratches on his neck. He initially attributed these marks to his electric razor, but later admitted he wasn't actually certain about their origin, though he insisted it was nothing concerning. John expressed that he was losing sleep over his fiancée's disappearance and simply wanted her home safe. Neither Caitlin's father, Dave, nor her sister, Allie, had any information about where she might have gone. The police began their investigation, and after initial scrutiny, they stated that John was not considered a person of interest at that time, shifting their focus elsewhere. The community mobilized quickly to search for Caitlin. Approximately 100 people gathered in Fairfield to distribute flyers with her photograph and information. They searched wooded areas, streets, and surrounding neighborhoods using various methods, including all-terrain vehicles. "Caitlin is the love of my life," John told reporters during this period. "I've been with her for 6 years. We've been engaged for a year. Today would be exactly a year. Today is also her birthday." Instead of celebrating Caitlin's birthday, family, friends, and police were searching for the now 22-year-old. Friends described her as a responsible young woman who would never leave without telling anyone, as this behavior was entirely out of character for her. "I kept texting her, no response, no response. I call her no response." John explained to the media, "I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I just want to find Caitlin and celebrate her birthday with her and go to Red Lobster like she was planning. That's all I want to do." Police reported at this stage that there was no evidence of foul play. They noted that the only things missing from Caitlin's home were herself and her cell phone, which they had not been able to trace. They believed she was last seen wearing a gray shirt, which became another detail for searchers to look for. As the investigation continued, authorities focused on data from Caitlin's phone provider. Text messages had been sent from her phone to John's between 11:04 p.m. and 11:36 p.m. on August 13th. But as John had stated, there was nothing after that time. At 12:06 a.m., her phone had either been turned off, the battery had died, or the SIM card had been removed. This was where the electronic trail went cold. Police interviewed the manager of a GE credit union in Fairfield, who shared that Caitlin had visited the bank 3 weeks before her disappearance on July 20th, 2011. She had been accompanied by John's mother. Caitlin had told the manager she wanted to apply for a credit card with John's mother as a co-signer. During this interaction, the manager recalled John's mother joking, "I'll co-sign for the visa, but you've got to take my son to Colorado with you." The manager then turned to Caitlin and said with a laugh, "I guess you're stuck now." The manager remembered that Caitlin didn't reciprocate the laughter. Instead, she appeared somber and serious. This suggested to the manager that perhaps the credit card may not have been Caitlin's idea. Ultimately, the card was never established. Another individual informed police that he had been with Caitlin and John on the evening of August 13th. The three of them had smoked marijuana and discussed the couple's plans to move to Colorado within the coming months. This witness stated that Caitlin had been on her laptop, working on schoolwork, didn't move from the couch, and seemed distant and not her typically bubbly self. He left her townhouse around 10:45 p.m., leaving Caitlin and John alone. While this was the last time he had seen Caitlin, nothing particularly noteworthy stood out to him, apart from her being somewhat quiet. He didn't recall seeing any scratches on John at that time, though he admitted it was possible he hadn't been paying enough attention to notice. This witness willingly took a polygraph test, which indicated his responses were truthful. During the overnight hours between August 13th and 14th, a couple of teenagers who had snuck out of their homes told police they had seen two cars driving from the direction of Caitlin's house with their headlights turned off. However, they appeared to be the only witnesses who had observed anything unusual, and beyond this account, the police had very little evidence to work with. Before long, Caitlin's case gained national media attention. The disappearance had deeply affected the Fairfield community, where violent crime was uncommon. Vigils, rallies, television appeals, and volunteer searches continued at all hours of the day and night. Even a national mounted search group from Texas conducted dozens of searches exploring local parks, waterways, old train tracks, and areas in neighboring counties. Caitlin's family made numerous public pleas, appearing regularly in local media, as did her fiancé John. "I keep believing that if she is somewhere in the worst-case scenario, that she fights her way out," he said during one appearance. "I keep wanting to believe that because she's strong. I know she's strong." Some continued to view John with suspicion, but he maintained his innocence. When Fairfield police searched his residence, he gave his consent and stated he was doing whatever he could to help, despite feeling that the community was placing blame on him. "I really did not want this to get this far. I really wish that she would have been home by now," John said in a media interview. "I wish this could have been just a party for her being home instead of what it is. People are going to say what they're going to say. You can't stop them." He further emphasized, "I'm not going to acknowledge the ridiculous things that people are saying because they don't know me. And I know me. I know that I would never hurt Caitlin ever in a million years." Meanwhile, Caitlin's father, Dave, continued working with authorities and organizing search efforts. As Caitlin's 22nd birthday arrived, the focus remained on finding her rather than dwelling on the sadness of the day. As the investigation continued, A friend of Caitlin's came forward with information suggesting that all might not have been well in the relationship. According to this friend, Caitlin had confided that she was feeling unhappy and trapped a sentiment she had held for approximately 6 months. She had expressed frustration with John's drug use and his viewing of pornography. Things had deteriorated to the point where she was no longer attracted to him or interested in physical intimacy, and she felt uncomfortable with certain activities John had asked her to engage in. The friend also mentioned that John could be jealous and possessive when Caitlin interacted with other men. As more people shared their observations, it became increasingly evident that Caitlin had reached a point where she wanted to end the relationship. John wasn't changing his behavior, and she found it difficult to justify his possessiveness and unkindness. Additionally, she felt uncomfortable with John's mother's involvement in their affairs, interpreting situations like the credit card co-signing as attempts to ensure they remained together despite her unhappiness. Some investigators wondered if Caitlin had felt so trapped that she had decided to leave on her own. Her family firmly rejected this possibility, stating that she would never have departed without informing someone or asking for assistance. They described Caitlin as a problem solver who shared everything with those close to her. The same friend also noted that just days after Caitlin was reported missing, John had referred to her in the past tense several times, which had seemed unusual at the time. In June 2012, the investigation briefly shifted focus to another individual. 26-year-old Gurpreet Kang, who had lived across from Caitlin, was accused of sexually assaulting a Miami University student. Police considered whether he might have been involved in Caitlin's case, but after a thorough examination of his whereabouts on the night in question, Fairfield police eliminated him as a suspect, returning the investigation to its previous state. Nearly 2 years after Caitlin's disappearance, on April 7, 2013, a significant development occurred. Human remains were discovered in a remote wooded area in Indiana, wrapped in black plastic construction sheeting. Through dental records, authorities confirmed that the remains belonged to Caitlin Markham. The location was approximately 30 miles from her home. A man named Andy Hicks had found the remains while searching for scrap metal. "I was just digging through this little area here, picking up some metal," he later explained. "And jawbone right on the other side of that little tree, right there, right between them two little trees." He described his subsequent call to the police. "I picked it up and I said, 'That's not no animal.' I hung it in a tree and went and called the cops." The medical examiner noted that Caitlin's skull had been found separately inside a tied plastic bag. There was minimal soft tissue decomposition fluid or staining inside the bag, indicating that her head had not decomposed within the bag, but had been placed inside after significant decomposition had already occurred. The bones had not been buried, but rather dumped with trash piled on top. Evidence of cutting wounds was found on her left wrist caused by sharp force trauma. The wound was described as a V-shaped incision that had removed a layer of bone made by some type of object. Beyond this, there was little physical evidence to determine exactly what had happened to her. Although the precise cause of death could not be established, investigators classified it as a homicide. Caitlin's phone was not found at the scene. Following the identification of her remains, Caitlin's funeral was held. Her artwork adorned the walls, and attendees wore bright colors, in keeping with her vibrant personality. Many people offered tributes, including John. "We would have had our kiss. We would have had our marriage," he said. "We would have had our honeymoon. We would have our kid, and we would have our life together. John's cousin mentioned that she considered herself fortunate to have known Caitlin as family. Whenever I think of her, I just think of the smile and this artwork she shared. She was just a powerful human being. She meant well to everybody. Everybody was a friend. Dave expressed that while the discovery provided some closure, he felt deeply saddened for Caitlin's younger sister Allie, who had been just 15 when her sister vanished. Some days I get so consumed with Caitlin, her baby sister lost such an important role in her life. He reflected. The location where Caitlin had been found presented additional investigative challenges. Since her remains were discovered in a different state from where she had disappeared, coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies was necessary. Investigators did not believe she had been initially placed at the discovery site, adding another layer of complexity to the case. By early 2015, the case had progressed slowly for several years. The reward for information had increased to $75,000, but interest in the case was waning with the passage of time. 3 years, and the question still remains: who killed 22-year-old Caitlin Mark, reported one news outlet. Dave successfully persuaded the Butler County Sheriff's Office to re-examine the case, transferring the investigation from the Fairfield Police Department to provide fresh perspectives. Concerned that his daughter's murder might become a cold case, Dave sought a new approach to the investigation. He also contacted a private investigator named J. Ryan Green, who integrated himself into Caitlin and John's social circle, interviewing more than a dozen people. 5 individuals, excluding John Carter, agreed to take polygraph tests. Based on these interviews and tests, Green narrowed his investigation to 2 persons of interest. According to Green, one subject took a polygraph test and failed the polygraph in epic proportion per the polygraph examiner. A documentary titled "Taken Too Soon: The Caitlin Markham Story" was screened at a Springdale movie theater to generate new leads. Toward the end of 2016, police announced they had identified a person of interest, but lacked sufficient evidence to make an arrest or publicly name the individual. The private investigator shared this assessment regarding the same person. In 2023, 12 years after Caitlin went missing, the investigation gained momentum. Police announced the arrest of Jonathan Palmerton, who was charged with perjury. Private investigator Green commented, "Whoever's investigating this now is on the right track. They've got momentum, and they have something that would allow a judge to sign off on a search warrant." Green explained that Caitlin, John, and Jonathan were part of the same friend group and knew each other well. Jonathan lived near Caitlin, and John was his best friend. When John had gone to Caitlin's house the morning she was reported missing, Jonathan was the first person he had called. Prior to Jonathan Palmerton's arrest, investigators had executed search warrants on 2 properties, one where Jonathan had lived in 2011 when Caitlin disappeared, and the other where John had resided with his mother at that time. Court records indicated that on April 21, 2022, Palmerton had allegedly lied under oath. He was indicted almost 6 months later in October, with the indictment remaining sealed until his arrest. Jonathan and John were also connected to Michael Strauss, an individual who had pleaded guilty to stalking and murdering another woman named Ellie Wyke, and was sentenced to 17 years to life. Police had considered Michael after he suggested that Ellie was not the first person he had killed. Despite some similarities between the cases, investigators eventually ruled out Michael Strauss as a suspect in Caitlin's death. Throughout this period, one person remained the focus of the investigation: John Carter. Since the discovery of Caitlin's remains, John had largely avoided media attention. Now 36 years old, he was married with children. Over the years, investigators had gathered substantial circumstantial evidence against him. The two vehicles that teenagers had reported seeing driving away from Caitlin's residence that night were determined to be John's car and an unidentified vehicle. Both his and Caitlin's phones had ceased activity around the same time on the night of August 13, 2011. Investigators discovered numerous text messages between John and Caitlin between 8 p.m. and 8:36 p.m. that had been deleted from John's phone, and some texts he claimed to have sent were never actually transmitted, including the good morning message he mentioned. John had voluntarily participated in 3 polygraph tests in September 2011, February 2014, and January 2021, all of which indicated deception. During his final polygraph, the examiner noted that he showed deceptive responses, specifically when asked whether he had disposed of Caitlin's body on Big Cedar Road. The search warrant executed at his mother's home resulted in the seizure of over a dozen items, including investigation notes, a folder containing Caitlin's school papers, an SD card, and poetry about death and killing. Some writings had John's name on them, with one reading, in part, "Deep down, I love her. You ought to kill her, but I love her. She must die. I can't kill her. Yes, you can. No, yes. How do you talk me into all these things? I'm just that good. But you're bad. I know. How do I kill you? You can't. You're right about what? Nothing." Investigators also found what appeared to be the same material in which Caitlin's body had been initially wrapped. The location where she was discovered was near a farm owned by the Carter family. Multiple witnesses had come forward to describe John's volatile and aggressive behavior, including a video of him shouting at his current wife while holding their child. When detectives presented some of the evidence to John, he showed minimal reaction, pointing out that it was all circumstantial, a choice of wording that investigators found notable. Despite years of denials and public pleas for his fiance's safe return, the evidence against him had accumulated. Although they recognized that their case relied on circumstantial rather than physical or DNA evidence, investigators felt confident in presenting it to the district attorney. In March 2023, the then 36-year-old John was arrested at his workplace and charged with 2 counts of murder. The first count alleged that he purposely caused Caitlin's death on or around August 13th or 14, 2011, while the second count claimed he caused her death on the same dates as the result of committing or attempting to commit a violent felony offense. John posted a $1 million bond, and as a condition of his release, was required to wear a GPS monitor. Jonathan Palmerton was also released pending trial. At his arraignment, John pleaded not guilty, and the trial was scheduled for June 2024. Jonathan's perjury charge was later dismissed. For the upcoming trial, the prosecution subpoenaed more than 50 people. After more than a decade of John denying any involvement in Caitlin's disappearance and death, he unexpectedly changed his plea. In court, his attorney stated, "Your Honor, he did." And Mr. Carter, if we may, on his behalf, John Carter stipulates that he committed the offense of involuntary manslaughter consistent with Ohio Revised Code 2903.04b, that is a felony in the 3rd degree. Specifically, that on the date specified in the indictment, he did cause the death of Caitlin Markham by the commission of a misdemeanor in the city of Fairfield, Butler County, Ohio. Dave described hearing this admission as an out-of-body feeling. He explained that he had suspected John for a long time, and while it validated his instincts, it also angered him to think that John had lived for 12 years believing he had escaped accountability. "We knew all along who it was," Dave said. It was a particularly difficult realization that John had attended Caitlin's funeral, embraced and cried with Dave, participated in searches, all while knowing what had happened. When asked if he could at least explain how events had unfolded, John simply responded, "I cannot." One inmate later told detectives that John had revealed how he had killed Caitlin, though John never confirmed this account in court. According to the inmate, John had said, "They broke into an argument. He said before he knew it, he had her pinned down to the ground. He was on top of her choking, and then after he choked her, he said he was pinned again, and he said he didn't know what to do. He was going to call the cops. He didn't want to call the cops. He said he made it look like it was suicide justice. So he cut her wrist." The sentencing came as a shock to many following the case. The judge stated, "Court imposes the following sentence based upon the serious nature of this offense and the factors that have previously been indicated that anything short of the maximum sentence would demean the seriousness of the offender's conduct and its impact upon the victim, and therefore will impose a definite term of incarceration of 36 months. John Carter received a 3-year prison sentence, the maximum possible for involuntary manslaughter, a third-degree felony. This would be followed by 3 years of release control. A detective who worked on the case commented, "I've interviewed from homicides to rapes down to trespass 1,000 people, and I've never interviewed a psychopath. And that's what I said when John left. I said, that's the first psychopath I've ever interviewed." Investigators were unable to prove it, but police and prosecutors suspected a second person had assisted John in disposing of Caitlin's body and possibly dismembering her. Though Caitlin's family finally learned who was responsible for her death, they still do not know the complete story of what happened and likely never will. "That is why there's no closure," Dave explained. "I still do not know the whole story. And not that I would have believed him, because he's lied for 13 years. But he's offered no explanation. Hasn't even tried. And that's just to me, that just shows his character." When asked if he thought he would ever get an explanation, Dave replied, "No, I don't. And even if he writes a confession in prison, he's going to have to be more convincing than he's been the past 13 years. Despite the maximum sentence being imposed, many felt the outcome represented an insufficient measure of justice for Caitlin. 14 years after Caitlin was last seen, an event called Butterflies for Caitlin Markham was held at a park near her home. Trees were planted, and attendees wore items featuring butterflies. The gathering celebrated art and color elements that Caitlin had cherished. Dave expressed appreciation for the continued support, noting that it reminded him he wasn't alone in his grief. So bright and happy, exuberant, friendly, outgoing, and she liked butterflies. He reflected, "And I don't know. There's been days that I've had bad days in the early on times, and the butterfly would come and fly around me like, 'Oh, hi, baby.' She was bright, vibrant, coming out of her shell, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly." Dave shared that living with such a profound loss and uncertainty about what actually happened remained all-consuming. "Not a day goes by that I do not think of Caitlin. I do not feel 3 years as justice, not for Caitlin, not for her sister, not for me, her friends, or the entire community that has ached and grieved alongside us," he said. "I often wonder what she'd be doing with her art and her career. She would be an amazing woman. She had a talent, and she was going to go someplace. I'll see a picture of art sometimes, and I'll think that should be Caitlin's up there. In the quiet town of Fairfield, the memory of a creative young woman with paintbrushes in her hair continues to live on through the art she created and the lives she touched.